This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for your purpose, your power, your journey to authenticity. As I share oftentimes, the reason I do this is because we all have a story to tell, and that story can change really from day to day. You may wake up one day and say, "This is what my life is all about." And tomorrow you realize, no, that's not what life is about. It's about something else. I like doing these podcasts, even though sometimes the messages that come across can be sad, heartbreaking, but we all can find some hope and find out that even though we all have challenges, there are opportunities. My guest today is Amy, is it McKiernan?
McKiernan.
Okay. And I met Amy through podmatch.com. So those of you who either have a podcast, want to be a guest on a podcast, great place to come, because I wouldn't have been able to have found Amy probably if it hadn't been for Podmatch. Amy, when I read your bio, what captured me were two words, something about sexual assault. When I was in the process of trying to get pregnant with my youngest son, was going through infertility, having a lot of issues, but I had a doctor appointment with a psychologist. And at that appointment, I was sexually abused. And it was the night before I was supposed to have my insemination. Now, my first reaction obviously was tears, disbelief, and to never want to get pregnant. But luckily, with the help of my husband and a lot of trained professionals, I went ahead, had my insemination, got pregnant with my son, who is now going to be 36 years old. But for many years, had to live with the thought of, did I do something wrong? How did this happen? So everyone has a story. And yours has something to do with sexual assault. So share it with us.
Wow. Well, first, I want to say thank you so much for having me and for sharing that piece of your story. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. You said already a lot of great points of how alone we can feel, when we go through something like this, and how also our stories change and evolve. And it's like, but we get stuck in the moment, as in like, this is all my life is, right? And it's hard to see past that sometimes. And so my story, I'll give you a little overview of who I was as a child. I had a good childhood. I was the youngest of three children. I lived with my parents, and we lived next door to my grandmother and my grandfather. Close family, big family, Sunday dinner at Graham's every week, spaghetti and meatballs, awesome garlic bread, loud laughter, full plates, that type of family. And it was a good childhood. I had supportive parents, loving parents. I was very fortunate in that sense. I know that not everyone has that. And so I was a creative kid, very theatrical, enjoyed performing and kind of having the spotlight, creating things, dressing up, things like that. And so things really started taking a turn for me when I was in middle school, junior high, seventh grade. I was 12 or 13, around that age. And that's when I had my first experience with an adult who was supposed to be a trusted adult, assaulting me. It was a teacher, and it was confusing. And it was kind of like this quiet, confusing thing that was like progressing. Um, I was talking to him about an assignment I had. You can already see that I talk with my hands. It's just something I
Yep.
do. And so I was, very dramatically talking about whatever it was. And he, kind of gently just puts his hand directly on my breast and just looks me in the eye. And he's like telling me to calm down. And I remember in that moment feeling like, okay, clearly this is a mistake, right? This is not intentional. But it was also, he just kind of stood there and then he slowly moved it up to my shoulder and just continued the conversation as if nothing happened. And I was so conflicted and confused, just like, okay, clearly that was an accident. I'm going to just pretend that didn't happen. Like, how embarrassing. And it wasn't until he just kept finding his way to touching me, um, that I was like, this isn't an accident. Like, I don't think that this is an accident. This just keeps happening. Um, and I finally told my parents. And, that teacher did end up getting fired. This was a long time ago. So it's very different than now, right? So he got fired. It was the end of the school year by the time this came out anyway. My dad actually requested to meet with the teacher, and they allowed him to, which was probably would never happen today. But so he did get fired, and I just kind of, pushed that experience down. I really, really just wanted to pretend it never happened. It was very confusing. It got around a little bit. I remember this moment where this girl came up to me in the hallway and just hugged me, and she was like crying and thanking me because he was always doing things that made her uncomfortable too. And so like it was bigger than I knew. And it was also something where I couldn't handle it. Like I didn't want to think about it. I wanted to really just express and move on. And that's what I did. And so I'm in eighth grade and then I'm moving on into high school and I'm still, finding who I am. I'm doing drama classes. I did a play. I'm like still that girl, you know. Um, and then, I'm in high school, a freshman in high school, just turned 15. And that's when I experienced my first rape. And that was by a friend. And there was alcohol involved and I was not where I was supposed to be. And I had lied to my parents. And so it was this, experience that completely rocked me in a way where I was, and anyone who has experienced, just like your experience, something similar, that self-blame, that automatic, well, I was drinking.
Yep.
If I hadn't drank so much, like, what do you expect? I had never really drank before. So, like, what do you expect? You're lying to your parents. You're completely out of your mind, incapacitated, getting sick everywhere. So, like, obviously, what do you expect? This is my fault. I couldn't tell my parents. I was so ashamed of myself. And I just also like couldn't really didn't want to accept what happened. I
Sure.
was in and out of consciousness. So like my memory was a little spotty and it was way too big. And so I told my sister because she had picked me up from, you know, my friend's house where I was supposed to be, where I ended up the next morning. And she knew immediately something was wrong. And she was pressing and pressing and pressing. And I explained to her what happened. And she was just beside herself. And I swore her to secrecy
Sure.
because I couldn't I just couldn't handle it. I like, and that was how I lost my virginity. I had never even had these sexual experience before. It was too big. And so she, kept my secret for, a couple days, and I, went to school on Monday. And this was over the weekend. I went to school on Monday, just like, okay, I'm just going to pretend this didn't happen. I always say I went to school a shell of who I once was. It was like this empty vessel, just going about the day and hoping that I could just forget. However, I saw him in the hallway, and he was with a group of boys and laughing and smiling. And I just looked away, and I heard one of them say, "It's okay. They never talked to you after." And so it was like, okay, wait a minute. Is he telling everyone that we, had sex? Like, what is he telling everyone? And so then it starts going around, the school.
Or,
And I didn't realize until after that there was actually two stories going around the school. One was that him and I hooked up, and one was that he raped me. And I didn't really think about it until much later as to like who was there were other people there that night who actually walked in on it. And I don't know if that's how it started going around. I'm not really sure. But all I know is that around lunchtime, this girl asked if she could talk to me. And it was a girl that I didn't really get along with. She didn't really like me. I was a little intimidated by her. And she was also in that same friend group. And I was like, oh, she's going to be mad at me. Like, I just assumed, like, she's going to be mad at me for this. And she asked me what happened. She asked me, actually, her words were, "What did he do to you?" And I didn't use the word rape. I just explained what I remembered. And she said to me, "I want you to stay away from him." And she hugged me. And it was like so bizarre. I was like, okay. And then she called my brother, who was in college. Um, and she knew him because she was older than me too. These were juniors and seniors that we were dealing with. I was a freshman. And so called my brother, who happened to be on his way home because he was really sick and he needed to come home. And so then he called my dad. And then by the time I got home off the bus,
when
everyone knew. And my dad was there waiting for me. He gave me a hug. And we walked into the house, and there we sat around the kitchen table as a family. And I just pause there and say that I was surrounded by love and support. I really was. And even though I was surrounded by love and support, all I felt was alone.
I'm
You
sure.
know, I, yeah. And it's like there's people who have the support right off the bat, and there's people who don't, and both things are still so valid and hard, and even if you are someone who does have that support, that loneliness and that shame and that self-blame, it still runs the ship,
Yep.
and you feel completely isolated. And I was like blaming myself. I felt guilty for the pain I was causing. Um, I could barely look at anyone. I mean, it was just awful. And then we went through the calling the police and the detectives, and going to the hospital. This was days later. And so there were a lot of physical marks.
Sure.
There wasn't like other evidence anymore, but there was a lot of physical marks still. And so then my secret became this case, and it turned into, I mean, detectives came to the school to talk to everyone who was there that night. I mean, the entire school knew, and it became my identity. I became known as the girl who was raped.
Right.
That's who I was. And I had people that I didn't know hugging me in the hallway or calling me a whore. Everyone was split. Either you were on my side or you were against me. Even the adults in the school were split, and it
Sure.
was you know, he got arrested at first, and then he got out on bail, and he was suspended, and then he came back, and there was I remember this one moment of a security guard in the hallway telling me that he said, you're not the victim here. He is. Because the other story was now going around that I was lying. And I think that, and I'll, pause for anyone who's listening, who has either reported something or has been afraid to report something. That's one of the reasons, is
Sure.
because not everyone believes you. And then you're found left to like defend yourself or explain yourself, or if anything like mine where alcohol's involved and you don't remember anything, it's almost like it goes against you, right?
Right.
Then your credibility is lost, and it's a terrible place to be, and it's not fair, and you shouldn't have to be going through that, and unfortunately that is the reality. And which is why support system and mental health professionals and things like
Right.
that are so valuable and important. Um, so, that was my freshman year. That was my identity. I turned to drugs and drinking, and I just anything I could do to numb the pain. I didn't even realize that I was really doing those things to numb the pain.
Sure.
Sometimes I would think about it, but a lot of the time I like to party, right?
Yep.
Like that's who I was. I was just fun. Like I like to have fun. Who cares? And I just like I couldn't be, right? I couldn't be for very long. And so, he ended up actually um leaving, rumor had it leaving the country. I don't know. He disappeared. And that was it. No justice, case closed. Cops couldn't find him, and that was it. And so that was just then, and there I was left to
Yep.
just be, and try to navigate the rest of my high school career, which was a very hard journey. It turned, like I said before, the alcohol, the partying, the drugs, many nights that I don't remember, and lying. I mean, I shut my entire family out. My sister, I wouldn't talk to her. I would barely let my parents in. They got me into therapy. I was, going, but as anybody who does therapy successfully knows, therapy doesn't work unless
You
you
do.
want it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have to be participating. And so there was a while there that I was just going. And it just I barely spoke to anyone. My parents were just desperately trying to connect with me, um, just trying to be a support. There was no handbook for this, they didn't know what to do, but they were doing their best. And honestly, just being there is all you can do sometimes, just physically being there, emotionally being there. Um, and so, my high school career is going, it's moving on, and um, I probably about a year later, I experienced my second rape. And that was by another friend. And again, alcohol was involved. And again, I didn't tell anyone, um, except for my cousin, who ended up telling her mom, and then my parents found out. But this time, I refused to tell them any details. I didn't report it. I refused to report it. I was not going to go through this again. I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. And so I just continued to go to school with this guy there. Um, and he was also older, so he ended up graduating before me. Um, and I just kind of pushed through, and numbing and all of that just continued, and it turned into also like relationships were hard. I was very drawn to unstable relationships and poor treatment. I wouldn't allow myself to be loved or cared for or respected even. I had friends or people in my life who did respect me, and I very quickly pushed them away. It was, very self-sabotaging, very much, I don't deserve that. This is my lot in life. It's almost like becomes like a comfort, right? It's like where you're most comfortable.
Right.
It's familiar, and that's what you accept in life. And so that self-sabotaging and just the poor relationships and all of that just became a part of it. And so I ended up getting into a relationship with this guy who didn't go to my school. He was out of town, which, that felt better for me because at least he was like away from knowing all the things. Um, and there was, an experience where, of course I would go to his house and hang out. My mom, man, she tried. And I have to say, like, when this all first happened, rewind a little, I didn't have a cell phone yet. Like, this is back when cell phones were newer.
Okay.
I did finally get one, and they didn't have the GPS trackers and all of that on it. So just for any younger listeners
Yeah.
who are like, well, how come they couldn't, figure it out? They didn't,
Right.
that technology wasn't part of it yet.
Right.
So it was like really hard for them to really try to keep tabs on me and not stifle me, but like also keep me safe. And so I would go to my boyfriend's house, and my mom would she would talk to his mom every time I went to just make sure she's going to be home. We're not doing, and his mom would yes her to death, and then we would do whatever we wanted, and so she tried so hard, and so we would go there, we would drink, we would get high, like whatever it was. And usually I would have a ride home from his mom or whatever it may be. But and then he had this uncle that would also be available. And this uncle really had this like weird obsession with me. He used to call me Anna Kournikova. I don't know if you know who that is. She used to be a
Yeah.
tennis player. Yeah.
Yeah.
I reminded him of her. I don't know. I don't see it, but he just like really had this like weird obsession with me. It was a little uncomfortable, but it was my boyfriend's uncle. Like, I just was like, all right, whatever. And usually my boyfriend would be with me when I would get a ride home anyway, except for the first time he wasn't. And, he was just too drunk. He needed to stay home. And so the uncle came and he gave me a ride home. And I remember feeling very uneasy in the car. I remember like him looking at me a lot, and then he pulled off to this side road that was dark, not close to home. And and that was the first time that he like touched me. He just promised he wouldn't do anything else. Or actually, I'm rushing my story. He just wanted to look. That's what he said. He's like, just I promise I won't touch you, just like a little bit, right? And so I let him, because I was terrified. I was terrified, and I just wanted to get home. And so I got home, and I was like, all right, I will not get in the car with this guy again. Didn't tell my parents. Um, And I ended up in the car with him one more time, but my friend was with me. And I like had it all I was like, okay, well, she's with me, so we're good. And I wanted her to stay over my house, but she couldn't. And so I remember sitting in the back seat with her, and he looked at me through the rear view, and he's like, who am I dropping off first? And I was like, I can't leave her in the car with this guy. And so I told him that he could drop her off first. And I knew that was like permission almost for him. And again, another side road, another promise to not go any further. But this time he touched me, and this time he kissed me. and he was into his 40s, and I was 16. Um, and I then I got home, and again, I didn't tell anyone. And I thankfully never got in the car with him again. I ended that relationship, and um, because I know what would have happened. I
Right.
just, he and he proceeded to call and harass me for a year after that. He would just call me. He would like masturbate over the phone on the other end, and I would just politely tell him to please stop calling, and I would hang up. For a year, I did that because I couldn't tell anyone. I was so ashamed of myself for allowing these things to happen, for being this person, that I couldn't see the abuse, and I couldn't see the predatory behavior, and I couldn't see the the grooming and all of these things. I couldn't see any of it. I couldn't see that I was actually a victim here. I just blamed myself. And that experience with the second rape happened like really close together. And so I just kind of kept uh, pushing through with this just emptiness, this brokenness, right? Like this complete brokenness. Um, I remember back then there was this song by Pink. It was called, I don't know if it was called Hazard to Myself, but that was like the gist of it. And I remember that every time it would come on the radio, I would be like, this is me. I'm just this hazard to myself. I'm my own worst enemy. This is who I am for the world. And like, it will not get better. And that's what I accepted. That became my norm, um, until I accepted something different. And that's the work part. Like, that's the hard part is,
Exactly.
yeah, like it took me having this like forced reset at one point. And granted, I'm still a kid in high school. I'm still a kid. Like, I had to like really look back and be like, you were a kid. And I have two kids myself now,
Yeah.
and like I was a kid. And so I got in trouble for something, lying, not being where I was supposed to be, again. And my parents found out. And at this point, they were so desperate to protect me, to get me away from the group I was with. They didn't know what to do. And so they came to a therapy session with me to talk with me and the therapist about like this other thing that had happened. And my dad very brilliantly was like, okay, there's 6 weeks left of school this year. And she told five, maybe I can stretch it to six lies. And so they grounded me for 6 weeks. And that was their way to like keep me protected for those last 6 weeks of school. No phone, no friends, no nothing. Just right home from school. Dad picked me up from school. I just right home. There was nothing else. And it was like this forced reset,
Sure.
uh, and that I really needed. I was not happy about it, but I needed this like forced reset of just pausing and like also being with myself,
Yep.
because I wasn't allowing that to happen. Any chance I got, I was distracting or numbing or something. And so this like forced reset to be with myself, and it felt really good. And that was like one little step to where I kind of stopped doing like harder drugs at that time. I was still doing other stuff. I was still drinking. I was still smoking weed. But it was like this little choice of like doing a little less. And and kind of gaining a little clarity. And like the therapy was starting to like I was accepting it a little bit more. And I still had some hard things happening, but it was like baby steps, right? And I got through high school. I started dating someone who didn't do, as many drugs and stuff too, like didn't smoke pot. So that was like my next little choice is like, all right, well, then maybe I won't smoke pot because of this guy, right? I wasn't doing it for me, but I did it for someone else and it ended up being good for me. So like, hey, and so there was like these moments in life where I made these small or big choices and it wasn't perfect, right? Like the healing, it's not like, okay, I'm healed now, right? It's all this like path and these like small choices and chipping away at it. And so, like, slowly, I started kind of finding myself again. And it became like this experience where I wasn't numbing as much anymore. I was still in not a great relationship. And that was still something that I held on to very tightly. But I wasn't numbing anymore. Right. And so there's like this new phase of life of just figuring out this relationship piece for myself. Um, and it really took until, I started going to community college after high school. I was with this guy for a long time. And I got pregnant. I was 20. And I got pregnant with my son. And it wasn't until after I had him that it like hit me where I need to care about myself more.
Wow.
I need to, if I want to be the mom that I want to be for this boy, and I
Sure.
want to model for this little boy how to treat women and be in a respectful and loving relationship, I can't be in this relationship because this is just modeling to him all the wrong things. And that's when I decided this was like one of the biggest choices of my my life was to end that relationship with his father and move back in with my parents. And that's when my journey of like self-love and rebuilding confidence and strength really started. I like the drinking was way less, like maybe just on the weekends here and there. Was already not doing drugs, but it was like the starting to choose myself piece started.
Love that.
Yeah, and from then on, I became a single mom. I was back with my parents. I started like working on college and finishing school, and slowly but surely, I like rebuilt myself, and I became stronger and more confident, and I was slowly starting to be the person that I deserved to be. And eventually, I got into a relationship with someone who I actually was friends with for a while first. And, we got married down the road and I finished college and, um, got into the early childhood education field as a teacher. And I've been married 12 years. I have my son who's now 18 and I
Oh,
am
wow.
co-parenting. Yeah, he's 18 now and I co-parent with his dad. We have a respectful co-parenting relationship. And I have a daughter with my husband. She's 10. And I've worked my way up in my fields and I'm now a director of employee relations where I'm working with adults and working on communication and things like that. And in the midst of all of this, I decided to write my book. And so, it took me like 10 years from like first really starting to think about it to like then starting to actually write it and then to actually finish it. Um, but I wrote my book and I'm just on this like mission now. Like I am just here to help others. I have become so strong and confident within myself, and I just want to share that. I just want to share how there's so much more than just surviving these things. Like my goal for others and what I've done for myself is to overcome them.
Right.
And that's where I'm at. And my book is called More Than a Survivor. 8 keys to overcoming sexual assault and finding a path to living a fulfilled life. And in it, I not only share my story, which is very vulnerable and raw, I share the keys, like keys that was able to name as I wrote it, of actually how to overcome these things. So it's like a guidebook almost.
Sure.
And it's got this like reflective journal that readers can download and connect with while they're reading so that they can connect to their own story. And I share perspectives of my dad and my sister, making it something that if for support people too, that they can also read. Um, and so, and I'm doing podcasts now, and I'm actually doing speaking events now, and I'm just like on this mission of being an advocate, a healer, someone who can give strength to those who need it, to those who feel lost or stuck or just so broken that they feel like that will always be their story.
You
You
know,
know, my, you know,
one of the things that I'm hearing, and it means so much to me, um, there are so many young people, and I probably was the same way, except I was afraid to get in trouble. So I didn't do those things, even though I thought I wanted to.
Mhm.
Um, but I watch so many young people today, just they're not mindful of what they're doing. Um, and the families today seem to be so distracted from what young people are doing. And if we could all just be a little more aware, okay, um, your parents probably could not have stopped what happened to you. As you said, you had a big, loving, caring family, and yet you were drawn to things outside of the family.
Yes.
Not unusual, because
Right.
hey, what else is out there besides this beautiful thing that I have here? Maybe it's more beautiful, even though it turned out to be ugly, but
Mhm.
even that ugliness has brought you to beauty. And if
Yes.
people can look at that and say, I don't have to stay where I am. I I can make those changes. And don't expect them to be overnight, like you said.
Yeah.
I know when I walked out of that doctor's office that day, my mother-in-law was with me. And I got in the car with her and I started crying. And like you, blame myself. I must have said something. I allowed him to put his hands in certain places. I didn't push him away. I didn't know what to say. And she, little little lady, I mean, to have known my mother-in-law, she was like 4'11" and probably weighed 100 pounds dripping wet. And out of her just came, you are not to blame. And I don't even want to hear it. And I just looked over at her and I said, but I must be. And she just kept yelling at me. She said, he was a doctor. What did you expect? And I thought about that. It was like I had given him the right because of who he was. And when I hear your story, it wasn't so much that you were giving guys the right, you were giving yourself the right by just not really being aware.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you were wrong. So I'm happy to hear how things have turned out. What is it like when you stand up in front of a room full of people and share this? Because I've tried and I've done it a couple of times, and usually I feel very depleted afterwards.
Yeah, I actually find it very energizing. Something, and I've always liked public speaking. It's like full circle for me because I started off as someone who liked the spotlight, and then very quickly, I mean, I dropped all my drama classes. I never did another play, became this person who could not even stand all eyes on me, to now someone who can be in a room full of people and share these like deep, vulnerable things and feel empowered by it. You know, it's like there's nothing like looking around the room and just connecting with people as I talk. And you can feel, right, like the energy, and you can feel like I can see that that person, there's something there and they need to hear this right now. And you know, when I was 15, after my first experience, my dad brought me to see someone speak. Her name was Katie, and he brought me to a school I didn't go to. She was speaking about her experiences, and I remember just feeling like empowered, but I wasn't like ready yet. But it was just like it planted this like seed. Like I thought about it all the time, you know, like, man, I want to be like her one day. I don't think I ever will be. Like that's not for me. Like, wow, healing is possible for her. And it was just like this impactful thing that I didn't even know how impactful it was, like fully, you know, but it like stayed. And I even wrote about that experience in my book. And then actually, very interesting full circle moment story is I started doing podcasts after my book, and the second podcast I ever went on was called Dear Katie, and it ended up being that woman,
Oh, how
which I
wonderful.
had, yeah, I had no idea. And then come to find out, it's Katie Kessner, who's like this face of advocacy, and she has done so much for the advocacy world. And I mean, she was on the cover of Time magazine in 1990 for coming out with her story, and just she's like this amazing force of a woman who's like does all these things. And after our podcast, she hired me on to be a speaker and presenter with her organizations. And that's how I got to do it. And so it's like now this like full circle moment of being the one on stage, just knowing that even if it's one person in the audience who just needs to hear it and
It's
can
a-
leave that room and feel some kind of hope, that's worth it. That's all I need, you know? And so, yes, the speaking events are incredible. And I find them empowering and energizing. I find that I have this really healthy relationship with my experiences. You know, I've gotten to this place where I can talk about them. It's like and in my book, I'm very visual, and I talk about like putting things where they belong. And like, if you envision your mind as a closet, right? And like your experiences and all the pain and the trauma and just the shame that you carry, it's almost like a sweater that you're choosing to put on every day until you decide to take that sweater off, right? Because you've become so comfortable wearing it almost. It's like your identity. It's like you can't leave the house without it. But until you take that off, and what do you do with it? You don't throw it away. You don't destroy it. You don't crumple it into a ball and throw it in the back of your closet. You put it away with care because that's what it deserves. Like your trauma, your story, that chapter of life, it doesn't define you. It is something that happened though,
right.
right? But it doesn't have to define your every fiber anymore, right? And so you like put it away with care. And sometimes you take it down and you revisit it and you talk about it and you have emotions about it. And then you put it away again, right? And so that you're not walking around every day wearing it anymore. And that's like how I function in life, to where it's just, I'm not wearing it anymore. I don't let it define me. I don't, I'm not the shame that I once felt. And there's something so powerful in that.
So you say you've been married now for what, 12 years? Is that what I heard?
Yes. Hmm.
So what was it like when you finally met your husband? And I'm assuming he's a good guy because you've been together 12 years. You haven't talked about trauma. But what was it like for you to finally connect with somebody who wasn't adding trauma to your life?
It took time, right? Like I entered that relationship and I still had a lot of work to do. I still had these things that kept popping up for me, even though I was in a much better place. And I think that's how, it works for many people is like there's these things that pop up for you, these triggers, these tendencies, and unless you can really sit down and connect and find the root of them and connect them to what they're connected to, you don't really know, right? Like you just kind of navigate through life like, okay, well, this is just who I am until you stop and be like, wait a minute, like why? Why am I doing this? There was a little bit of self-sabotaging. There was trust that like assumptions and like automatic reactions that would happen because that's what I was so used to. And it took a lot of work together to identify the underlying roots, to be honest about them, and to work through them together. And he actually, we went to high school together. So he knew of me. We became friends junior year. So it was kind of after all my experiences happened. And we were friends ever since. But he like knew of my stories. He had heard about them. So, you know, but yeah, it takes, time and it evolves, right? So it's like you work through something, you get married, and then all of a sudden you're having another child or kids, and something else comes up. And so it's like, oh, okay, we have to work on this piece now. So it's an ever ongoing thing. It ebbs, it flows, it stalls, it backtracks. Healing is not linear. And we did couples therapy a few times to work through things like, and it wasn't always because of my trauma. It was just things, right? Life's life and sometimes, and so, but yeah, so it took that open communication from both of us to just take things one step at a time as they came up too, as new things and things that were already there. But yeah, there was definitely patterns and tendencies and things that I had to work through.
And I think it's important that we all understand that even the control we have, life evolves around us. Sometimes control is not 100% ours. And because of that, um, we have to learn to be kinder to ourselves. That's something that recently I've really been working on. Um, I lost my husband 4 months ago, and so I'm still going through this. I'm okay, but then I'm too okay, which I'm not okay. And
Mm.
so I have to stop in the morning and say, okay, it's a new day. Something else is happening. I have to observe it and I have to accept what I can do and what I can't do. And if I can't do it, it doesn't mean I have to give up. It just means I have to accept that for now. And so that's what it sounds like you have gone through. You are, in some ways, extremely lucky to have had a family that you had that didn't desert you when you chose not to follow the path they wanted you to follow initially.
Right.
God bless your son for being the catalyst for you.
Mm-hmm.
Does he realize how important a part he has played in your life?
I've been telling him more and more now that he's older. I actually did a podcast where I was talking about the same thing, and immediately I got so emotional afterward, and I immediately texted him. I was like, I just need you to know this, right? Like, in a lot of ways, you saved me. Like having you was one of the best things for my life. And I mean, he's going through his own struggles and challenges, and it's been hard. And but I really think that my experiences and the strength that I've gained from them have helped me become the mom that he needs. And so, yeah, I've been talking about it more and more now that he's like a young adult and he knows about my story, he knows about my book, like those things. So yes, I definitely express that to him.
So, how can my listeners find you obviously get your book, and you say your book is almost like a workbook as well. So that could probably help anybody through any kind of trauma that they're going through. It doesn't have to be sexual abuse. It could be your own inner voices that are just pushing you maybe in the wrong direction. So how can we find you?
Yes. So you can find me on my website, amymckiernan.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. I'm working on being better on social media. So follow me, connect with me because I'm trying. Um, and my book's on Amazon. You can support independent authors and get it from Book Baby Bookshop. It's called More Than a Survivor. I have it right here. And yeah, so it's really, I like what you said about it doesn't have to be sexual assault because you're absolutely right. I've had people read it who don't have those experiences at all, and they didn't even know they needed it. And they were like, oh my gosh, but this helped me work through this other trauma that I didn't even realize was like so heavy. And so, yes, it's a great tool for overcoming the hard things. We all can do it and we all deserve to do it. And I promise that these keys, they're attainable for anyone. It's an easy read. It's not daunting. It's anyone can access this. And that's what I wanted it to be.
That is absolutely wonderful. Now, all that information will be in the show notes. So, for those of you listening who said, I missed that, Amy, can you repeat it? No, she doesn't have to repeat it. Go to the show notes, check it out. If you forget the show notes, just go to newclevelandradio@gmail.com. Email me. I will send you Amy's information. And thank you for sharing your story. The best of luck as you evolve. And we look forward to more and more people sharing their stories and getting the assistance they need. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye bye now.